Welcome in, Draft Nicks, to a special episode of Draft Nation today. I am Chris Mack. You know, you're trying to keep up on everything going on in all four major sports and what your favorite teams are doing, where your favorite players may be headed. That's what draftnation.com is for. Get on over there today and create your own free account and stay up to date on everything that's happening. The NFL, they just passed the trade deadline. They got the second half of the season in front of them now and a push for the playoffs in a lot of spots, but maybe your team's out of it and you're trying to find out a college player they might be looking at. Certainly plenty of information there. Major League Baseball, hot stove season kicking up now that the World Series is over. Plenty there as the GM meetings just wrapped up in San Antonio. And, of course, NBA and NHL just got started as well. And those teams trying to figure out where they are in the middle of things. And you're trying to figure out, like I said, if your favorite players may end up being a part of it. DraftNation.com is the place to go. Definitely a guy that has been through all of that. He's been the player, and he's been with multiple teams, found himself in the middle of an NFL career, despite being one of the fastest people on earth, probably didn't think it would go that way. We're happy to bring in former Oakland Raider, now the CEO of something called $1 Million Mingle, which I want to ask you about in just a little bit. AC Caswell is with me today here on Draft Nation. AC, thanks for taking the time, man. How are you?
Hey, brother, I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Chris, for once again, I always tell people for giving us a platform, giving us athletes a platform to chime in with you guys and chime in with the fans. So doing wonderful, brother. Appreciate you.
Yeah, and I think your story's fascinating, man. We got a lot to wind through, and I always love to start at the origin, right at the beginning. You grow up in South Central, and uh, I hate to say the cliche, but it's that cliche of a kid growing up in South Central LA in a tough neighborhood, in a tough environment, and still somehow coming out of it and becoming successful. To get to that point, you've got to have inspirations along the way. You've got to have mentors along the way. A lot of what you're trying to do for other people now. So who were those inspirations when you were a kid growing up in that difficult situation in a tough neighborhood in South Central LA? What inspired you and who came along and helped mentor you?
No, absolutely correct, man. And I never have a problem with sharing my story because I think, the world that we live in, this is called real life. And you have
Mm-hmm.
people in real situations that need to really hear role models and testimonies of how they can make it out and how they can have an opportunity to hold on to their dreams, because I was definitely a dreamer. It's funny, people come to me all the time when they see the Netflix series All American. And like anything else, it's a movie. It's as close as possible to real, but I lived that times 100, right? And yeah, you're absolutely right. Growing up in South Central LA, I was a true product of my environment, which was drugs, gangs, violence, bullying, all the things that a kid go through every day in life, from before school, after school. It's always just something going on. And for me, once again, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. This is my background. I'm proud to know where I'm from. I think that also have developed me a lot of toughness in me, a lot of awareness, a lot of strength, fight, power, when you go through those type of life situations. But for me, sports was my passion. Even going through all that I went through, man, I just love sports. I love running the streets. I love playing pickup basketball, baseball, football. I mean, anything that involved with sports activities, I'm there. And but there's a lot of twists and turns to a kid like me growing up in South Central LA, because you have a lot of things around you and you try to find those mentors. And believe it or not, a lot of people don't want to hear this, Chris, but I'm a
Mm-hmm.
realist, man. What people didn't realize, brother, that those mentors also were those gangbangers. Okay. When you talk about peer pressure, the type of peer pressure that I experienced, couldn't you imagine being in LA around some of the toughest gangs, but they're all athletes too. And they're like, I want you on my team. Nope, he's going to be on my team. And you're like, well, which gang bang team do I play on? Right. Because if I don't play on this one, they're going to try to beat me up. And
Yeah.
so it was just so funny, man. But yeah, that was kind of my background growing up in LA, and tough environment. But I believe that it also has built character.
How'd you avoid a similar ending to unfortunately a lot of people that you probably grew up with? Like, I mean, I instantly go back to, and again, this is probably cliched. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like I instantly think of Ricky and Boys in the Hood, right? I think of that kid who's got the world in front of him, right? He's got the scholarship to USC. It's all there waiting for him. And he gets cut down in the middle of his prime. And undoubtedly, that's probably happened to folks who either ended up behind bars or just didn't last because they weren't able to avoid those kind of pitfalls. How did you avoid it?
Oh, Chris, I can tell you, brother, I've seen that hands down all the time. Like I said, it literally is a movie.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk later on down the road about who my family member is. I'm sure you know that, but we'll talk something later on the road about what can happen. But I tell you this, brother, this is the truth. Some of your greatest athletes that never made it into the NBA or NFL or baseball was out on the streets. Some of those guys that I played with got murdered. Some of those guys are in prison. Some of those guys just bad breaks, because they couldn't get away from those other environments, right? Those other opportunities. Well, I was one of the guys that honestly that they came to me. When I say they, meaning the athletes, I'm sorry, the gangbangers said, "Hey, this is not for you, man. You have a talent, you have a gift, you have an opportunity to do something special." And as funny as it sounds, yes, those that I needed that push to say, "Hey, leave this alone, because if not, you're going to end up dead or in prison like us." And you have an opportunity. So a lot of people don't realize that, from a gang perspective, when those gang members really became your friends and family, which is true. People don't probably realize that, but I tell people all the time, when I made it successfully as an athlete, not just in football, I actually turned professional in track and field first before the
Right.
NFL. Those guys weren't my payroll. They weren't my bodyguards. They weren't my entourage. They just someone that said, "Hey, man, you have an opportunity to make it." How many guys we see that were killed and murdered after high school football games who were the all-star? How many guys who would just walk into the store, who was a star basketball player who got mistakenly, blasted because he had on just a USC color, trying to represent USC, not representing the gang, but that's how we lived. You lived
Yeah.
always looking over your shoulder, and someone's approaching you, always thinking you're part of a gang, and you're like, "Hey," you're trying to explain, like, "Man, I'm just an athlete." I remember one time in point. This is no lie, Chris, in LA, my grandmother passed away. I'm a huge Dodger fan. Okay, huge. I was going to junior college in Arizona,
Mm-hmm.
and I went back home to LA to honor my grandmother. And I'm a huge Dodger fan. And I'm in Inglewood, and Inglewood is a part of a different gangbanger territory. And
Right.
I'm wearing my all
All
blue, and
blue.
man,
Yeah.
and everybody found out that I was back in town. And man, I had about 5 to 10 carloads drove up on my grandmother's funeral at her home at the repast, and they were like, "Send him out here." I'm like, "Man, I'm an athlete. I'm just, I'm wearing my Dodgers colors." You never know when you grew up in those type of
Wow.
environments. So, imagine that, right?
Yeah. No, it's amazing to consider how you have to fight to come up through that environment to get to where you were, which was because of that athletic ability, not just a football player, but a track star, right? Like which you
Hmm.
alluded to, you mentioned it, Glendale Community College, where you played football and ran track, but you end up going pro in track, which is, I mean, I think back to what, the early 90s, right? I'm thinking about late
Hmm.
80s, early 90s when
Hmm.
Carl Lewis is like one of the most famous people in the world, right? And just how, if you were fast, you were considered the best athlete or one of the best athletes in the world. So how does that come to pass where you've got football and track parallel, sort of running parallel to each other, no pun intended, and you end up deciding to go with track instead of football?
Well, what's so funny, and I say this all the time, and I'm gonna be. Everybody know I'm a realist. I'm the real cheetah. Okay, I'm the real cheetah. I'm the first cheetah. Mom, as a little kid growing up, my mom always said, "You're such a little cheetah." I was so fast. I would challenge anybody. I would run all throughout LA, challenging different neighborhoods. You want to race? I would just race you. I love speed. I love running. And my mom always said, "You're such a little cheetah," and I stuck to that. Like, okay, I'm the cheetah. Nobody can beat me, right?
Tyreek
No
Hill
matter.
owes you some royalties,
He owes
is
me
what you're
some
saying.
royalty, and I'm a brand marketer too, so I'm coming after my
Yeah.
royalties, man. But with that being said, I love sports. I played baseball. Unfortunately, didn't have a true baseball mentorship in my life. I also would have played baseball, to be honest with you, because biomechanically I was built for baseball, but I just didn't have a baseball mentor in my life to show me the game of baseball. I was fast as ever, still in bases, but just didn't have a true passion for baseball. But track and field and football was my thing. And it just so happened that as every kid dream, you always dream that one day I want to be a professional athlete. We all dream that dream, especially living in our environment, because what else do you have to look up to, right? You're like, man, I want to become a professional athlete one day. And here's the kicker. I'm sorry, Raider Nation fans, plug your ears up. My favorite team in the world was the Cowboys. I knew that I was going to be a Dallas Cowboy. You could not tell me that I was not going to replace Tony Dorsett. I mean, I just knew that, yes, he was a lot older than me, but I just knew that, hey, man, if I ever make an NFL, I want to be a Cowboy fan. And that's a funny story on how that ended up. But love track and field. I love football. I love sports. And like you said, just had an opportunity to pursue it through youth sports, and got together with some great coaches that believed in me, saw enough talent in me, and said, hey, this kid can really play. And just went through the high school system, and just kind of keep fighting the fight.
Well, I think I want to say I saw one of your better performances as I was going through stats was actually a game against the Cowboys, right? Like 3 or 4
Yeah,
catches for 80 yards. Little
yeah,
inspiration there playing against your
yeah.
boyhood team.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, man. So I kind of skip fast forward, and we can kind of jump around. But
Yeah.
as you find out, I'm one of the only players in NFL history, and I say this proudly and humbly, just because of motivation. I'm one of the only players in NFL history that took the route to get to the NFL that I took to get into the NFL. By youth football, high school, being recruited by every major university in the country because of my speed. I was one of the fastest sprinters in the world as a high schooler, coming into my senior year. I ran like 10.3, 4.3 4s in the 40, and then going into junior college, being recruited all over again. My grades slipped a little bit in high school due to my grandmother passing away, lost my nephew, went through some tragedy that I didn't know how to
Mhm.
cope with. So my grades slipped, and I ended up at junior college. And that recruiting process started all over again, where all the major universities were coming after me for football and track. Now I'm running 10-1 electronically, never did steroids. And I'm about 4.3, maybe about a 4.31, 4.32 in the 40, and this is in junior college, once again
Mhm.
carrying that tradition of speed, being recruited by all these major universities. And I ended up narrowing it down to USC in Arizona State that was going to offer me a dual scholarship. But by the time I finished my sophomore year, I had just qualified for the USA Olympic track team. I got my USA Gold card that allows you to compete professionally around the world. So I made a tough decision to turn pro and track and field first, with a company called Mizuno Track Club, would sign me to a major track scholarship. I'm sorry, major track contract to travel all over the world running track. Right out of junior college. So I forfeited my last 2 years, and still missing football. Terribly. I love football.
Right.
A lot of my best friends like Rocket Ismail, Damon Mays, Felipe Sparks, Darren Woodson, all these guys that I will continue to do off-season training with, just to kind of stay in a little bit of football shape, every off-season for like 2 years straight, while I was still running track, and they had already got drafted. And they're like, man, you still can play ball. You need to get out there. I'm like, yeah, you just telling me that because you're my friends. They said, no, you still can play, man. You need to get taken serious again. And I said, well, we'll see what happens. But long story short, I end up taking the track and field route and missing football terribly, and end up getting back in the football world. And I tell you, Chris, you're talking about mentalness, emotional. I mean, strategy, competitiveness,
Hmm.
mindset, mind over matter. When people telling you that you suck, you'll never make it, you didn't take the traditional route, you're not good enough, you're not big enough, you didn't have all the tools to make it. I never bought into that. I always believed that I had greatness in me to play this game. I just needed an opportunity for those young kids that are out there. If you have a passion and you believe for anything that you want to do and you stick to it, trust me, it's going to pan out for you, and that's kind of the route that I took.
Well, yeah, you stuck with it. So training camps with the Raiders, right? Al Davis
Hmm.
finds you. We know Al Davis loves speed, or loves speed, and his son has continued that tradition in Vegas now.
Yeah.
Raiders have always loved speed. A couple camps with them. I mean, you scratch and fight and claw to stay in the game, right? CFL, Arena League, NFL Europe.
Hmm.
Who did you keep in touch with? Because I found that, and you just mentioned it there, you meet guys coming up, and then maybe meet them in training camps as well. I imagine you mentioned Rocket Ismail. I imagine you were probably in camps with like Tim Brown, guys like that who could mentor you and keep you going when you're over in, I don't know, Hamburg, Germany or something,
Hmm.
playing a World League or NFL Europe game. What kept you going through those years?
Well, to be honest with you, like you said, those friendships that came in my life, since high school, and because I lived a double lifestyle from LA to Arizona because of my father that raised me in my life, from Arizona and LA. So I kind of lived a back and forth lifestyle from Arizona to LA, and finally, thank God, I settled down in high school where I had a chance to kind of complete my high school year in Arizona, but still being from LA, having ties in LA. And excuse me. And with that being said, when I went through the high school rankings, the friendships that I developed with Darren Woodson, Felipe Sparks, all NFL, Damon Mays, Toby Wright, a bunch of my partners in Arizona who we all played junior ball together, high school ball together, all went off to the NFL. So we had a great, brotherhood, of friendship, and always encourage each other because we always want to make it together, right? And they knew that my route was going to be a little bit different. And they told me, "Hey, man, you're gonna have a different route, but you have the talent." And they really told me the truth, like you really have the talent to play this game. So as I made it into those arenas, like you said, semi-pro, arena football, Canadian League, NFL Europe. I mean, brother, I did it all. And then when I got to the Raiders finally, um, of all the teams, yes, Al Davis told me straight up. He said, "Hey, man, we knew about you in junior college. We love speed. We know you from LA. We want to see you progress to be able to sign you to make you a Raider for life," which he lived up to that. But whoever thought that once I get back home to LA as a Raider, um, obviously that lasted but a hot minute because Al Davis comes back in the locker room my first year as a Raider, like, "We're moving back to Oakland." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Man, I just got my house in LA." And but here's the funny part about this whole testimony about being a Raider. So if a lot of people don't know, they probably know now that Tim Brown, the Hall of Famer great Tim Brown,
Mhm.
became my cousin-in-law because my cousin Sharice obviously is my cousin. That's my first cousin, Sharice.
Okay.
So when I came back home to LA, I was actually staying with my cousin Sharice in her apartment, and as I kind of get situated, and I won't get into too much of her personal life, but she was doing her thing, and good, great young lady and doing her thing, and taking me to practice to the facilities, and eventually, over due time, me being a wide receiver, Tim Brown and Rocket really kind of becoming my mentors. You're like, "Hey, this is what it means to be a real NFL wide receiver," and I was like, "Hey, Al Davis wants speed. I'm gonna give him all the speed in the world because that's why he brought me here." But really, I was so young and raw. Maybe coming right out of junior college, I didn't have a lot of experience, and it took for those guys to sit me down and say, "Hey, AC, yes, your speed. We love your speed, but you got to learn how to be a real professional wide receiver. You got to learn how to real run and timing routes. And sometimes you're
Right.
overrunning your routes and throwing things off." I didn't understand none of that, but I was so blessed and thankful that those guys took me under their wing and said, "Hey, man, we know that you have the talent, and we want to see you make it and be successful. And these are the type of things that you have to eat and drink and work out and train the right way to be a real professional." I just never had that. So with those guys investing into me and believing in me, and all of a sudden, years later, Tim Brown and I become family because of my cousin. It just developed a relationship even stronger. It's still business on the football field, but having someone like that in your life as well, who always have been the ultimate pro. I mean, so I learned so much from him, just his professional mannerisms, how to carry yourself. And,
Right.
he's just always been a great mentor for me to look up to, and know that, wow, man, if someone like this can make it. Now we all know, how popular he was, Heisman Trophy winner and all those things. I didn't get a chance to experience that part of it, but just his mentorship, when he couldn't have, he didn't. I mean, the guys that I've met with big egos and attitudes and think that they're better than everybody else, man, he could have been that person, but he was exactly what I needed to see as being a professional athlete for me to build my confidence up to make it.
So, do you still watch a lot of football, AC? Do you see guys in the NFL that remind you of the way you played?
You know what? I do and I don't. I think because of and once again, I still live the sports industry because of the businesses that I own and
Hmm.
sports agencies and representing, other young men and athletes. But it's a different time, it's more marketing and branding and NIL deals, and everybody wants to be a brand, and everybody has different personalities, and I can understand that, but also there's a still a professionalism that I believe that we're missing a little bit. We remember back in the day, if you don't mind me saying, if you was a hothead like Terrell Owens, it was like, you know, is he someone that I want to, do business with off the field? Is he
Right.
is he someone that I mean, is that a personality? Is that just showbiz, or is that really that person off the field? And I think, well, we try to come in as a sports agency and as being a former athlete who's lived those different eras is try to help these young men and women athletes to say, guys, there's one thing to be a brand, okay, that's business, but it's also one thing to be a good person.
Hmm.
You can mix the two. You don't always have to be the bad boy 24/7, where it's costing you relationships, and it's costing you endorsement deals. It's costing you people that don't want to do business with you after your career. That's where we try to clean it up and say, guys, hey, let the entertainment be the entertainment, but understand the real world is going to hit you fast, and people are going to remember that that's the same guy that was so egotistical where he didn't have time to sign an autograph or take a picture because he's too bigger than
Yeah.
the game.
As someone who covered Antonio Brown pretty closely during his time in Pittsburgh, yeah, he could have used somebody like that when he was reaching his peak. That's certainly someone that comes to mind. But as you push forward now, and like you said, you're trying to find opportunities to help others along now. And I mentioned you're the CEO of $1 Million Mingle, which I think does something pretty cool. It takes maybe lesser known nonprofits and charities and gives them the opportunity to feel big, for lack of a better way to put it. I'm doing air quotes with my fingers for those that aren't watching the video, but it takes a small nonprofit that maybe feels like that big fundraising opportunity or that limelight spotlight level opportunity might not be for them, and kind of gives them that opportunity, right?
Absolutely. For me, Chris, growing up back again in my environment, if it wasn't for the nonprofits that took me in, my brother and I, and fed us and they clothed us and they signed us up for sports, they come in and just they provided a safe haven for us after school to come in and just be a kid. Sometimes we
Mhm.
needed that, right? You got tired of after school, everybody want to fight you, or they're going to gang bang and they're going to do something just destructive and corruptive. You're like, I'm tired of that. So for those nonprofits that said, hey guys, and these were the lesser known name nonprofits. No, that's not a disrespect to the YMCA's and the Boys and Girls Clubs, but these were the nonprofits who fought every day to feed us, to clothe us, to make sure they signed us up for sports, gave us a safe haven just to get away. You didn't know these brand names, right? They just did great work. To this day, I don't even know how they survived, feeding us. But I just knew that at an early stage, I wanted to give back. I knew that because that was given to me as a resource, that no matter what I became in life, okay, whether it be an athlete or firefighter, police officer, whatever it is, I'm going to give back. So I just knew that having this platform as a professional athlete now, traveling all over the world, going to some of the most prestigious events, and charity events and galas and all these things. And I love that power saying, wow, look how these people are raising money for these organizations. but also I saw a disconnect, like, where are the smaller minority organizations? I know about the big brands raising money,
Hmm.
but who's fighting for those guys? So what we did back in the day in 2006, my wife and I, Deidre, we ended up creating this brand called $1 Million Mingle Celebrity Charity Fundraiser right here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we wanted it to focus on raising millions of dollars by putting on high profile luxury events for other smaller minority charities that doesn't have a name or face to their brand. And Chris, I tell you, man, here we are now in 2024, once again, being responsible for raising millions of dollars for charities, man, all over the world, locally, nationally, and globally, excuse me, and just doing some great work, picking up 4 or 5 new charities that no one knew about every year, and seeing these guys grow through our network, through our sponsors that are now making donations to these nonprofits that they never knew about. So that is a true passion of, what is your purpose in life? It has to be bigger than sports. It has to be bigger
Yeah.
than just how much money we can raise. Have you built anything over your career about serving and giving back? And that's kind of where we're at with $1 Million Mingle.
So, are there any? I guess, and you mentioned it. You work with a lot of different small nonprofits, but are there any that I guess you got an opportunity to give a little shout out to that you want to talk about
For
or
sure.
highlight?
Oh, absolutely. It started off with the first motivation, to be honest with you, back in 2006 was a dear family called the Seal family, Ted Seal, Regina Seal, Brandon, and Bonnie Seal. And that's kind of what kicked me into high profile, meaning that I was always doing celebrity charity football camps and basketball games and softball tournaments and, doing those fun things too. But my wife and I got approached back in 2006 with a family right here in Arizona. It's called the Seal Story, and the dad Ted Seal was a Paradise Valley motorcycle cop. Excuse me, who had a major incident. He didn't lose his life, Chris, but he was never able to perform his job duties again. And his beautiful wife Bonnie had just got diagnosed with cancer. His oldest son, Brandon, had got diagnosed with Asperger's disease.
Mm.
And his pride and joy daughter, Regina, who was 6 years old at the time, she was the youngest person in the world with one of the most rarest disease right here in Arizona. And they were struggling to get help, in and out of the hospital, bills not getting paid. And once my wife and I found out about, what was taking place, we kind of dove into action and said, well, hey, let's meet this family. Let's talk about this story. How can we help? And I say this humbly, when you've been down the road that I've been down, where you have now established yourself around other celebrities and other professional athletes and other billionaires and millionaires that I've been doing business with and networking with, I knew that I was in a position to say, hey guys, let's get some people involved, but I also knew that it took a great luxury event to get their attention. That's just business, right?
Hmm.
And we end up coming together and saying, because of this family, and looking in this little girl's eyes at that time, who was dying right in front of us, and I said, hey Regina, we're going to do this major event called the $1 Million Mingle Celebrity Charity Fundraiser. We're going to raise millions of dollars for your cause. Not really knowing what I was saying, I was just emotional.
Sure.
And all of a sudden it came to fruition, and we were like, all right guys, $1 Million Mingle, whatever that means. We got together with our marketing team, branding, the mission statement of why we're doing this. And Chris, we did our first ever right here in Scottsdale. We did it in February because that's spring baseball. That's our NFL offseason.
Sure.
Everybody's in Arizona.
Hmm.
And we did our first ever celebrity charity mansion party, which about a little bit over 4 or 5 thousand people showed up at my first ever celebrity charity mansion party. From, I promise you, man, from Tiger Woods to Mike Tyson to all the baseball players, football, NBA, doctors, attorneys, people just showed up and showed out, man. And we raised close to about $700,000. Didn't reach our goal of 1 million, but it became so popular where we thought it was a one-off. Like, hey, we did a great job for the family.
Hmm.
We're out. And next thing you know, Chris, man, the emails, the calls, the text messages said, man, you got to keep this going. It was such an elegant event. Athletes were able to, hang out and network, and it was awesome. And here we are in 2024, now being able to say, guys, every time we do these major events, we can pick up 3 or 4 different nonprofits like Rise and Dream Foundation, which is a great nonprofit that does work for families, raising money and furniture and clothing and food for these families. Michelle Cares Foundation, but You Don't Look Sick Foundation. Like a lot of these nonprofits, I'm telling you about. Nobody probably even know about these, but these guys
Yeah.
are doing great work in the community. Real Fathers. Here's a foundation that we just picked up this year because this was close to my heart. My father-in-law, unfortunately, that passed away a couple of months ago,
Mm.
raised his kids by himself. Okay, my wife, mother, obviously left her at the store left her on the doorstop as a baby, and so she didn't know her mother. And my father-in-law did a great job raising his three kids. So when this foundation reached out to me and told me about their story and said, "Hey, we're called Real Fathers," meaning that we're men that are raising our kids who we lost our wives or the kids lost their mothers and we don't know what to do. There's no resources out there for us. So that was a no-brainer to pick that nonprofit up. So we created a tagline, Chris, through $1 Million Mingle. It's called "We Fight for Life Causes," meaning that my board, my staff, anybody that's around me have to keep their eyes and ears open on what are the next causes that we can get involved with to shine the light on and get these guys some help. So that's kind of what we're all about. We have a lot of amazing small name nonprofits that, because of us picking those guys up and spending thousands of dollars on marketing and branding those guys and putting their logos on everything, I feel good to know that people are now knowing who these nonprofits are and they're blessing them.
It's amazing, AC. Really, it is. As someone who's done a little bit of work with charities, that it sounds like what you're doing is just on a whole other level. And to raise the platform and the profile for other smaller nonprofits is you're doing good stuff. So it's inspiring. And want to thank you for the time today, man. Hearing just a little bit about your story and a lot about what you're doing now with $1 Million Mingle. Thanks for taking the time for going on the clock with Draft Nation. We appreciate you giving us your story. If people want to reach out, if they know of a nonprofit that may benefit from working with $1 Million Mingle, is there a way they can do that?
Absolutely, Chris. And once again, thank you guys for giving us the platform. We always tell people you can stay in tune with us at mdmexperience.com. That's our main website. We will have some. We're getting ready for Super Bowl, as you know, so we're going to be doing some cool things in New Orleans with Super Bowl and picking up some nonprofits there. But I do want to share this, if you don't mind. Just I have to
Sure.
give shout out. I have to give shout out to Al Davis. A lot of people know that he was my mentor in my life, and who came into my world and just really gave me an opportunity to even be here today, who believed in me, not just as an athlete, but also invested time with me to be an entrepreneur. A lot of people don't know that relationship that him and I had outside of football. And I'm very blessed to see Mark Davis carrying on the tradition, through our Raiders alumni. As you see, we're representing our alumni and doing a great job keeping us healthy mentally and physically, emotionally. Such a great organization, man. That's keeping us up to know. So, I want to give shout out to the Davis family for just really believing in me, because honestly, man, he was one of those mentors that if it wasn't for him giving me a shot, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't know what road I was going down.
Yeah. Absolutely. Everybody needs somebody like that, and it's great to hear that he was that for you. AC Caswell, again, $1 Million Mingle. Check them out online. If you know of a nonprofit that may be able to work with them, obviously reach out. And thank you again for all the good you're doing in the world, man. We appreciate you coming on the clock again with Draft Nation.
Oh, thank you. Raider Nation, let's go.